Welcome back to the Linux Academy Nginx Deep Dive. In this video, we're going to take the WordPress application that we set up in the previous video, and we're going to set up a virtual host server configuration for it so that we can use Nginx as a proxy for it, or reverse proxy rather. This is going to be using FastCGI, and we're going to be communicating over a socket, and we're going to be using a different module than we used previously. So before we used the Nginx HTTP proxy module, and now we're going to be using the Nginx HTTP FastCGI module. Notice the difference in what we see here when I click over to this next tab. There's almost no difference whatsoever. You can notice that it changes what's before the underscore, but basically all the rest of these directives stay the same. And that's how similar these two things are. Proxy pass and the proxy module are basically going to be speaking HTTP. The FastCGI module does almost all of the same things, except for it's speaking a different protocol in FastCGI. So if we know that these two modules are similar, then we can kind of assume that some of what we need to work with is going to be the same. So you'll notice that there is a FastCGI pass and a FastCGI pass header, and these are a little bit different than you would otherwise see. So we had the set header before on the proxy, but these are not exactly the same. So that's where the differences are going to kind of come in, and some of the things with headers, because since proxy pass and the entire proxy module is speaking HTTP, headers make sense. In the context of FastCGI, these are going to be parameters. We're going to talk about parameters quite a bit in a second. But proxy pass is going to take an address. Notice not a URL. So this is going to be assuming that it's speaking not over HTTP because FastCGI is its own protocol. But this is how we're going to actually be using it. It's going to be by using FastCGI pass with Unix : and then a path to the socket that we're going to communicate over. And this is more performant in a way because we are going to be bypassing the entire network stack and speaking directly over a socket. One of the other ones that we're going to be looking at kind of right away is going to be the FastCGI index. And the way this is going to kind of work is the same way that the index directive works when we're just normally working with Nginx for serving up web traffic, is that there's kind of a URL that it's going to be working off of, but in FastCGI context, that's going to be the script file name. And we need to kind of know what is going to be put beyond there if somebody sends over something that isn't a specific file name. So if somebody sends a slash, we want this to be index.php, probably. So we actually need to set this, and we're going to set this one too. Let's get started just knowing that we need to use FastCGI pass and FastCGI index. We're going to get started by modifying a new file called confd blog.example.com.conf. Takes a server block. It's going to listen on port 80 with a server name of blog.example.com. And then we're going to set the root here because remember, we put the entire WordPress application into var www, and we did that because that's kind of the standard thing you do with PHP applications like this. So we're going to do that into var www blog.example.com as the root to serve static files from. And then we're going to set up a location / directive that's going to have a few different try files in it. Woo. And inside of here, what it's going to do is actually do try files, and it's going to look for the URI itself. So if somebody makes a request to a static file that we have, it's going to go ahead and accept that. If that doesn't work, it's going to look to see if there's a directory for it. And then next, we want it to go to index.php and then pass on the arguments as a query string. So if we can't actually find the URL and it doesn't end in PHP, then we're going to assume that it's going to be kind of a search parameter for us. We're going to change the actual index to be index.php. And that's so that if there's an index.html, we don't just try to serve that up. We're always assuming that we're going to be serving up from PHP pages. To get past this, now we're going to go and create another location block that's going to take a regular expression for anything that ends in .php. Oops, sorry, that's a $, not a question mark. And then here's where we're actually going to set up our reverse proxy. So the first thing we're going to do is set that FastCGI index to be index.php. And then we want to do a FastCGI pass. And remember, this takes an address that can be a Unix socket. So we're going to do Unix var run php fpm.sock. And then the thing that we haven't seen up to this point that is you're going to see quite often when you're working with PHP FPM and FastCGI things in general is going to be this line that is, not induce, include FastCGI params. And we'll take a look at that file, but this is a file that comes default with your installation of Nginx. And one extra thing that we need to do because we're working with WordPress is actually going to be changing a parameter that's already set in there for script file name. And this is going to be document root and FastCGI script name. So let's save this. And then we're going to open up, and since we're local to these files, we're going to just open up another file that is FastCGI params just to see what this is. And you'll see that it calls FastCGI param numerous times. And remember when we were talking about what this was, and FastCGI being its own binary protocol, where HTTP has headers that it can speak, FastCGI has its own params that have very specific names, and then we want them to be very specific values. So this file is Nginx's standard way of converting what it knows how to speak over HTTP into the proper names for FastCGI so that it can pass those over the socket or just through the FastCGI protocol to another application that can speak FastCGI. What we did by adding the script file name param was make one that isn't in here. So there's currently no script file name param, and that's just because there's a difference in the newness of the PHP that we're using and this configuration that comes out of the box, where we needed to make a slight modification with how standard PHP is configured, so we needed to add that. But thankfully, this is basically what you need to have set up, and this is how you would customize, kind of in place of headers, this is how you would customize information that you're passing over the FastCGI protocol is by adding another param. So we can use bn to go back to our previous buffer. Since we already have this FastCGI params file that's setting up the mapping, it's really the adapter layer between these two things. This basically gets us where we want to go. So now we're ready to save this file and quit. And then we want to make sure we didn't mess anything up and use systemctl reload nginx. And we need to go into our Etsy host again. Oh, whoops, not on the cloud server though. That's important. We need to come over here and use sudo to vim into Etsy hosts. And we're going to add blog.example.com to the end of this list and save it. Now I can come back over to Firefox and use blog.example.com. This is going through and letting us configure WordPress because it's the first time we've actually done this. We're going to set this up as a test blog. And username, I'm going to use just admin. And I'm going to change this password to be password. Hopefully it'll actually let me do that. There we go. And that's just because this isn't a real website, but I want to make sure that I don't forget the password in between recording videos. Send this to my Linux Academy email. And discourage search engine. Not that it could actually find this. But now we can have it install. And we can log into our admin dashboard. And we have a running WordPress blog behind Nginx. Going back and taking one last look at our configuration, if we look at the blog.example.com.conf, I just want to kind of call your attention to similarities and differences between what we did with Proxy Pass versus FastCGI Pass. And so you can kind of get the visual mapping of how these things would work depending on the kind of application that you're trying to proxy to. They're mostly the same concepts. It's just instead of headers, we're going to be using params pretty often when we're working with FastCGI and also when we're working with uWSGI. So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at the documentation and kind of compare and contrast what's going on between the proxy module and the FastCGI module and become familiar with these. These are going to be things that you're going to be using a lot with Nginx because reverse proxying with Nginx is one of the most common things that we're going to do with it. In the next two videos, we're going to set up a uWSGI Python application, and then we're going to set it up to use uWSGI's module in order to proxy using the uWSGI binary protocol.